Hey there, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. We all know what that means. Another riveting episode of Behind Breaking Bond.
Hey, Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, Crime Stoppers of Houston. And before we start, just want to wish everybody a very happy and safe holiday.
Definitely.
Be careful and be safe.
What are you doing? You traveling?
I refuse to comment on that. See, and that's actually a smart thing to do because I don't want anybody to know.
That's right, yeah.
So there. But thank you for that setup question.
You're welcome. Introduce yourself, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Smith. I'm with the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. And yes, I would like to wish everyone a happy but a very safe Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the time when we gather with family and friends. So just be prepared. If you have some family members that might need your help, be prepared to listen, be prepared to believe, and be prepared to help them.
When we were talking earlier, you made a really interesting point that people might be getting together with family members, relatives, friends they haven't seen in a while, and they might, if they're in if they're in a domestic violent situation, they might open up to somebody and feel like, well, here I can talk about this.
Exactly. So we gather with family and friends during the holiday season, and check in with your family members that you might not have seen for a while. Find out why you haven't seen them. One of the things that abusers are notorious for doing is for isolating their victims. And so sometimes when you have the opportunity to go to a family gathering, this might be a time for you to be able to reach out and to get some help. If you notice there's something strange about your cousin that you haven't seen in a while, if there's extra heavy makeup that might be covering up some bruises, if you look down and you see that there might be some fingerprint bruises on the arms, or that they're just afraid to look you in the eye, that they constantly are looking to their partner as is it okay to talk? Is it okay to talk? Yeah. What am I saying? Yeah. Or if you notice that if she or he says something and then they get that look from their partner, that means, hey, when you get home, you're going to be really sorry that you said this.
Yeah.
So, just kind of be aware of that, and just be open to receiving what they have to say. And also just know that there's lots of resources that are out there. The best thing to do is to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 1-800-799-SAFE, and to give them a call. And it's also really important to make sure that you believe them. We've worked with so many people that are like, we've interviewed family members of people that have been killed. They're like, oh, he was the nicest guy. He always was the one that helped me move, that was always the one manning the grill. Yeah, abusers can be really nice guys. Right. They're just not nice to their partners. Yeah. And so, believe somebody, because this might be the first time that they're actually reaching out to get help. So make sure that you are receptive and that you let them know that you're available to talk, and that there are resources that are out there.
It can happen to any family, to anybody, can it?
Yes. It doesn't. Domestic violence it happens in every socioeconomic, for every race, every gender, every sexual orientation. It happens to everybody. And it can happen to the person that you think is the most put together person. You're slowly hearing different things about people that are coming out now. You can even, look at what's been happening in the national news, where, someone just, filed a lawsuit against a very prominent person. And that abuse was hidden for years. So it's really important to recognize and to realize that it can happen to anyone. It can happen to someone that lives in River Oaks or someone that lives in 3rd Ward, and it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah. And too, it's one of those things that people will say, well, just leave. It's not that easy for people to just leave.
Actually, the most dangerous time for a victim is when they choose to leave. One of the things the Coordinating Council does is we facilitate the Adult Violent Death Review Team, where we review domestic violence homicides. And I'll never forget one time we were reviewing several cases, and a crusty old homicide investigator stood up and he was like, y'all need to tell people to stop telling people they're leaving, because every single case that we had she or he had been leaving.
Yeah.
And so when you say, why don't you leave? Yeah, that's great, but where are they going to go?
Right.
What are they going to do for money? What's available that's out there? We know that shelters are full, that resources are full. There's waits on hotlines. So it's really hard to tell someone to leave. But what happens when that person leaves is the abuser's losing power and control.
Right.
And so what they will do is they will try to keep that power and control for as long as they have. So that's the most dangerous time, because if you go back, you review all y'all's stories that you put out on the news, you'll hear estranged husband,
Yeah.
divorced, separated, ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend. I mean, that's all that you hear. It's because that is really the most dangerous time.
I'll age both of us. Do you remember Bob Fratta?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bob Fratta was a prime example.
Yeah.
Right, going through a very acrimonious divorce,
Mhm.
and we all know, ended up Farah.
And he's one of those people too that would come off as all put together and, the kind of person everybody, yeah, right.
Right. He was-
That everybody would like, and what a great guy. And he was horrible.
And he had a very dark and scary past.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but again, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, and you don't know what's happening with your neighbors, with your family, with your friends. I mean, even with the people that you go to church with,
Right.
we have an interfaith committee, and we're trying to tell pastors and imams and rabbis that, when you look out into your congregation, you don't know what's happening between those people.
Right.
You don't know if that little girl that is sitting in your church just heard, mom and dad fighting all night long, and then they had to get up and get dressed in their Sunday finest and go and sit in a congregation and listen, and everyone coming up and talking, whoa, what a great family you have, what a wonderful father you have, what a wonderful mother you have. And so it's really difficult sometimes to realize that this is like, we call it a pandemic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's worse than, it's.
Speaking of pandemics, and since the pandemic, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been an uptick of homicides. Domestic,
There's-
a major uptick.
There's been an uptick in homicides. And really, you go pre-pandemic, you go since Hurricane Harvey. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I know Andy, you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions, but you go back to Hurricane Harvey and you go back to the backlog at the Criminal Justice Center. And you go back to the fact that these cases are stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. And you have like 4, 5, 6 cases that are happening, and the perpetrators not being held accountable. So what does that tell the victim? Hey, I'm going to call the police.
Right.
They might come arrest him. He's coming out. He's going to be out on bond.
And they
And
might
then it
not
just
come and
keeps-
arrest him.
And they
yeah.
just keep coming. And I know that our police officers are just as frustrated as
Right.
we are, because they do everything they can, and then the guy, the perpetrator gets out, or, and then comes and commits another bond. And it gets, and commits another crime and gets another bond. And so it just makes it really difficult for a victim to see justice.
Right.
Because we haven't had justice in such a long time for some of these.
How do you put your trust and faith in a justice system that right now is tilting in favor of defendants?
Right.
Right, exactly.
And I could see where some people might think, well, if I go the law enforcement route, that's going to make the person even madder at me, or it could be even worse than it is now.
Exactly, because somebody else is finding out what's happening behind these closed doors. The other thing, and the other issue that we have that we're really concerned about right now is the United States Supreme Court just heard the case of Rahimi versus United States, which is the Fifth Circuit ruled that even if you have a protective order, the respondent can still have a gun. And so
Right.
there was an argument, and it was just, oral arguments were just on November the 7th. We're waiting for that decision, for hopefully that they will do the right thing, and they will say, yes, you have a protective order, you should not have a gun. I mean, that is, right now, that's the federal law. We have several laws in Texas that prevent someone that's been convicted of family violence from having a gun, someone that's been convicted of a felony from having a gun. But our protective order statute is based on the federal statute, so that's what we're really concerned about.
When do you expect a decision coming down on that? So what are
Your guess is
the
good mine.
what are the ramifications if they rule that a perpetrator who's got a protective order is still allowed to have a firearm? What would you?
I would say there's going to be a lot of people that are, why do I even need a protective order?
Right.
How is this going to protect me?
Yeah.
It's going to allow folks that should not have guns to have guns. And it's going to be catastrophic.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's never good when people that shouldn't have guns get guns.
Right.
You just know it's not going to end well.
And I am not for any means, advocating do away with guns, and
Right,
gun
no.
ownership or anything like that. No, there are people that should not have guns. And what we do know is that if there is a gun that's involved in a domestic violence situation, it has a higher chance of being lethal. How easy is it just to go and get your gun and you're mad at someone?
Yeah.
Even if you talk about suicides and things like that, being able to not have access to a gun, being able to place that gun someplace that is safe is great. Now, right now in Harris County, if you have a protective order, we have a gun surrender program through the Harris County Sheriff's Office that you can go surrender your gun. Right now, nobody's using it because we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
There's a few cases that were brought to my attention in a few months, and I'll just run this by you. So we had someone that was charged with a family violent assault, and then he gets out on bond, and I guess what you would call revenge porn, posted pictures of his estranged partner on social media, not in a very flattering way. And, of course, the partner finds out about it, reports it to the district attorney's office. There's a motion to revoke his bond, but they allowed him to remain on bond. And again, put a no contact order. In your world, do you keep track of the fatalities that have a no contact protective order versus those that don't?
Actually, what we have found is that a lot of the people that are killed by their intimate partner don't go to traditional domestic violence services. That they go to their friends and family, and they go to their faith community, but a lot of them don't necessarily reach out to what we would consider traditional domestic violence situations. What we have noticed in the last couple of years is that it's getting harder to get a protective order.
Is it?
And for various reasons. A lot of it is just that it's been difficult to access the court to get a protective order. And it's hard sometimes for the judges that have been on the bench to believe that domestic violence is happening. Now, there was just a bill that was recently passed that you don't have to prove future danger anymore. So you would think that would be easier to get a protective order. But it's still difficult. You still have to go, there's still, there's long lines of people that are going to either the district attorney's office or ABDA to go get a protective order. And then you still have to wait. Then you have to serve the person.
How long do you normally have to wait? Would you say?
It depends. Anywhere, like right now, we're hearing anywhere from about 4 to 5 weeks, and a lot of that has to do with serving the respondent. It's like trying to find them and serve them. It's not like TV. You can't go in and kick down the door and say, "Hey, you've been served." So you actually have to track them down.
Does there have to be violence? What if somebody was emotionally abusive and the victim in that case, could they get a protective order even though it's not, if it's just all kind of a mental thing, emotional rather than physical?
In order to get a protective order, you have to prove that domestic violence has occurred. So you can make an argument that is domestic violence because technically that is the definition of what domestic violence is. You can make that. It's just hard sometimes to prove that up because it's difficult. You can look at, depending on what the emotional abuse is. Is it harassment? Then maybe you can look at the harassment. Is it stalking? Then maybe you can go like the stalking route. Is it like messing with your car, well, maybe you can do criminal mischief. I mean, there's
Right.
different ways, did they just threaten you? Then maybe you can do a terroristic threat. There's different ways you can get there. You just have to have someone that's willing to get there with you.
Right.
So quickly, so I always get it, well, what's the difference between a restraining order and a protective order?
Good question.
I'm telling
A restraining.
You should be a reporter. David.
you. Fox couldn't afford it.
Right.
Right.
A restraining order is a civil court order that is punishable by a fine. Like if Andy was harassing you, you
Uh-huh.
could get a restraining order against him because y'all really don't have like
You should try that.
Yeah.
See what happens.
y'all don't have an intimate relationship. but a protective order is a civil order that is you have to have certain relationships. You have to have been dating, you have to be married, you have to live in the same household.
Right.
And if that is order is violated, then it has criminal ramifications. So it could be then if it's violated, a criminal charge is filed or should be filed, and then you can go to jail as a result of that for violating the protective order. But there's a limited number there's a limited scope of who's eligible to get a
So a
protective order.
restraining order is a little more of a civil,
Right.
right? Where, it would be Chandler's been bothering me and he's a bad neighbor and I get a restraining order against.
Brookshire, they'll lock him up.
Yes, exactly. And Chandler has an opportunity to respond to that as well.
I don't want to hear what Chandler has to say about me. It's
Yes.
not going to be good.
Right.
What do you see? You got holidays coming up, you got the end of the year. How do you guys, in your agency, how do you get?
Do you get like more calls and stuff?
My agency does not have a hotline, but what we do know with our partner agencies is that there is a constant uptick in calls, and there has been a constant uptick in calls.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that different things are coming. Like you said, the holidays are coming. There's additional stresses like with finances, travel, seeing family. There could be stresses around unemployment or losing your job, things like that. And those are all stressors that could aggravate what's already going on in your relationships as well. The other major concern that's happening in the domestic violence world right now is that the Violence Against Crime Act funds are being cut. And
Really?
So what we're looking at is a 40% cut in what's called VOCA funds, which funds a lot of agencies here in Harris County.
What's the rationale for cutting?
Yeah.
There's just no money.
It's federal
It
money.
comes from federal funds.
Yeah.
And it's being cut across the nation. So it's not just here in Harris County. But a lot of our sister agencies, they rely on that money. And so we're really concerned what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years with trying to figure out how we're going to fund the
So we
services that
need
we
to
have.
make that issue part of the upcoming presidential campaign.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's a legitimate.
It is a legitimate concern.
Right, yeah, it should be.
The funding comes from fines and fees that are levied against those that are convicted of a federal crime. And so some of that has dried up over the last
So we need to go
years.
convict more people of federal crimes.
Right.
that have money that they can seize.
There you go.
We could do
White
that
collar
with
criminals.
all,
Right.
with all the weapon charges, they could do that.
Right.
There
So
you
yes.
go.
So we've got a solution.
Okay.
We
well,
just
let's
figured
work
it out.
on-
All
okay.
right. Way to go. Amy, thank you so much. Please come back again. It was very enlightening. Before we go, you've got somebody out there that's watching you right now and they're in one of these situations. What's the best advice you could give them?
Tell someone, talk to someone, ask for help. If someone comes to you, believe them, help them, but be careful. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can help you do a safety plan because you're going to need a safety plan. You need a safety plan for when you stay, when you need a safety plan for when you leave, and friends and family need a safety plan for when that happens as well. Just be careful. Don't put yourself in that type of situation. If you are in the process of leaving, do not tell your abuser that you're leaving them. If a friend is coming to pick you up, make sure that the offender is not there, or meet at a safe location so that there are people that are around, know where your fire stations are, know where your police stations are, go someplace where there's going to be a lot of people.
Yeah, you almost, it's one of those things that you just kind of have to really think about kind of every move before you do it, right?
And as you said, it's the most dangerous time for anybody to leave their abuser.
Right. And ideally, before my lifetime is over, I would like the question to be reversed, not to why doesn't she leave, but why do they abuse?
Yeah.
Why are we victim blaming? We don't ever blame the victim on any other case.
That's a great point.
We don't ever say to a robbery victim, why were you robbed?
Yeah.
We don't ever say to somebody who was hit by a DWI, why were you driving at midnight? You were perfectly sober. Why were you out there? So we always are blaming the victim in a domestic violence case, and it's the only case where a victim gets blamed.
Why do you think it's people that they see it growing up and then they kind of repeat the cycle?
Well, one of the things that we also discovered with our adult violent death review team is that a lot of times people don't understand that they're in an unhealthy relationship because they don't know what a healthy relationship is.
Right.
So we at the coordinating council have started changing how we talk about domestic violence. And when we go out and do trainings on domestic violence, the first thing we do is talk about healthy relationships.
Yeah.
Because how can you know what a healthy relationship is if you've never seen it? You've grown up in it, your neighborhood, that's all there is.
That's what you think is the norm.
Right, yeah.
And then you look at television, you look at everything that's going on out there in the media. And so it seems to be normal. And it's not. And so that's why we need to talk more about healthy relationships. We need to start early.
Yeah.
We need to start, as soon as at a child's birth, to talk about how to have a healthy relationship, to talk about consent, to talk about, what that means and what that looks like. And even in, like my nephew was 4 and he was talking to me about how his friend Abigail, wanted to come up and give him a hug. And I said, well, did she ask you if she could give you a hug? And he said, no. And I said, well, you need to know, you need to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, even at 4, you need to know. It's okay to say no if something makes you uncomfortable. Do not make your kids hug people they don't want to hug. Do not make your children be nice to someone that they don't feel comfortable with. The creepy guy that used to sit at the park bench, again, aging us, is now on the internet.
Right, yeah.
Sure. And is now has access to your kids. Monitor your kids, see what they're doing, look at their computer usage, figure out what's happening, but don't ever make your children do something that makes them uncomfortable. I'm not saying let them do whatever they want.
Right.
But if someone comes up to you, don't say go hug Uncle Harry.
Yeah.
I mean,
if it makes you comfortable, you don't have to do that.
Exactly.
And as a society too, we kind of push this fairy tale kind of a thing on everybody. And it's like there are people out there, well, I'll find somebody that's going to make me happy. No, make yourself happy and then find somebody to have a relationship with. I think anytime people go into this, I'm going to find somebody to make me happy, that's not going to work out for you, right?
Right, and you also can't fix people.
Right.
So it's really important to remember that, in order to have a healthy, happy relationship, you have to be healthy and happy yourself.
Right.
And you can't fix someone, you need to make sure, and you need to set up boundaries and you need to set up communication.
Yeah.
And boundaries are really important. You need to set up boundaries around finances, around who you spend your time with. You need to set up boundaries around sex. You need to set up boundaries around everything and agree to those. And then if someone pushes your boundary, is this the time? This might be the time to leave before anything happens. Yeah. And also to have good communication.
And it's true, you can't love someone else if you don't love yourself, right?
And to make sure that you have a good communication skills too. And,
right.
And it's okay to agree and it's okay to disagree. But let's face it, if someone you love and you're disagreeing and you're scared of what's going to happen during that disagreement, then that's a red flag that you need to look at.
That's not love.
No.
That's not love.
Real life is not a Hallmark movie.
It is not.
It's
It
not.
is not.
So what do we got tonight?
We have
Speaking of
a,
what we're talking
yes,
about. Yes.
on tonight's breaking bond, yes, this kind of goes along with what we're talking about. We have a defendant who's a habitual offender, correct?
Well, I would say.
In and out of prison many, many times. He has been convicted of felon in possession of a weapon 3 times?
Correct.
3 times. He's arrested in Fort Bend County and gets bond.
Yep, for 2 violent acts and a misdemeanor, so he's out on bond and then gets charged again with yet another
Felon in possession of a weapon.
And evidently.
Get out of jail free card.
He's back out and then he gets charged again, so.
Yeah, and it gets very troubling what happens next. So please be sure to tune in to Fox 26 News at 9 for tonight's Breaking Bond. Thank you all so much for watching and have a great Thanksgiving and be kind to yourself and everyone else. Bye.